Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Raphael. I'm the Director of Security Enablement at Relativity, where we do all things legal tech.
And so tell
Yeah.
me, what does security enablement mean at Relativity?
You know, I like to use that term as a bit of an umbrella word for the sum of all vulnerability management, application security, and now AI security into
Mm.
one grouping, if you will.
And, give us a little backstory here. Relativity had this initiative called Blocking with Confidence. Um, where did that come from? What does it mean?
At the beginning, we what we wanted to do was really to be able to jump into a deployment pipeline, and like most security teams do, apply a bit of control in terms of what reaches production, what doesn't, what gets blocked from deployment at what point. And so we built out the tagline, blocking with confidence, and very quickly understood that there's really two questions to answer in that statement. Blocking, which is profoundly trivial and really not something that I'm going to address today. You stop things from happening, whatever. With confidence. Now that is where you need to be introspective and truly wonder, okay, what does that mean for me? What does that mean for the organization? What does that mean beyond the scope of the security organization? To put it in really blunt terms, how often are you willing to step forward and stop what the business is doing to say, no, this cannot happen for security reasons?
Yeah, and I mean, I think blocking may be a bit of a four-letter word sometimes with the business or with developers. What was it like to get buy-in for this program?
It was surprisingly easy at the end of the day, right? Like with most programs, when it comes from good intentions and from good optics, it's you need to get the right people on board and you make it happen. Um, I think that everyone understands the cost, or maybe not everyone, but everyone in the leadership position definitely understand the implications of what, a potential security breach might incur. Um, and getting the right people in the right room and saying like, look, we want to accomplish this. How can we build this together? Together is the key word here. How do we make it for the business?
Yeah, and so the poll that we ran before we started the session, we were asking about when does vulnerability scanning happen, before code ships, after code ships. The answer is about 63% say before code ships. So, roughly 2/3. Um,
Mhm.
Before you implemented this program, when was relativity scanning?
Both to a degree, and it still is both to a degree. Um, I would say that what really changed out of this program is less where we scan and more how the results are being classified.
Say more.
Uh, yes, so to start with, when you're building, and I'm just going to talk in the abstract here instead of purely for relativity, when you're building your security program, you'll typically start with something that's a little easier. You're building from scratch. You might need to build a vulnerability management, an AppSec program, cyber program, all of these in, let's say, the span of a year to be aggressive. And these will be imperfect and will need to evolve over time. It is what it is. Um, when comes the time to really mature that program is kind of where I find this to be interesting. Uh, we wanted to be. Let me rephrase that. We really wanted to be able to block, like I said, right, and build that confidence in the program. So instead of using the one source, when you start with, you might be using only the CVSS rating and call it a day and say, well, I'm going to create vulnerabilities for absolutely everything I detect with a CVSS rating and just ship that over across the fence to some developer who's going to figure it out. That is an approach, and it will get you somewhere, but it needs to evolve at some point. Uh, and that's kind of where we grew and took massive steps forward to not only include CVSS, but building. Um, I don't want to use an AI machine because that's not fundamentally what it is, but something that factors in a lot more than something as exclusively CVSS.
Yeah, you're talking about context, right?
Exactly,
Going
building
back
the
to what Sri
context.
was talking about, be it, EPSS and exploitability,
Yeah,
be it reachability.
and temporal environmental scoring, in building an understanding that what might be perfect today may not be tomorrow,
Mhm.
and staying on that growth curve as the company evolves.
Okay, yeah, makes sense. Well, why don't we jump into the slides you prepared?
What I wanted to do is take a second to thank everyone here, everyone in the audience, everyone who has been presenting before me, everyone who is in the organization. Thank you, Jenn, for being here today and for giving me the chance to speak on a topic that's near and dear to my heart.
Yes, you are very welcome. Oops, I accidentally started Zoom. That's not what I wanted to do. And I'll work with, we work with computers every day. We know what we're doing.
We do, absolutely. I mean, while the slides are loading, I can start talking.
I got it. Go for it.
Perfect. Thank you. So
You're welcome.
this title, what I wanted to talk about is getting people to do the right thing. And I'll just be honest here and say that this is a complete bait and switch title. There is no such thing as the right thing. It's an evolving spectrum. It changes every day. It's not something that is a real, if you will. So what we really want to do is incentivize people to do what's right as much as possible. And we know that's never quite clear cut. So instead of standing here and just boring you all with philosophical pontifications about right and wrong, I'll just move on and use a generic definition, right? Incentivizing individual contributors' decision processes toward making their product more secure as their default behavior. This is what I want. So how do we get there? We need to talk about incentives. How do we build the right incentives? Well, as you can see in this beautiful slide, you could always hand people giant bags of money every time you do something right. If you live in that beautiful world where that's realistic, I want to hear about it. That sounds delightful. But if, like me, you suffer from having non-infinite budgets, you might need to be more creative and find a different solution that's going to scale with you. In terms of more creativity, what other incentives can we work with, right? We can make people's lives a little bit easier by either reducing, improving, or shaping their workflows in such a way that it's not as painful to do that right thing. And this is where security enablement comes in. I already spoke briefly about what it means for me, for us at Relativity. But how do we get there? There's a fundamental point in terms of enablement where what we want to do is let people drive their own destiny. And a portion of getting there is a rather scary prospect from a security standpoint. You have to let go of a degree of control and hand it to the right person to make the right decision. And I will in fact argue that there are many times where the security organization is not the right one to decide whether a specific risk should be taken or not. And part of the reason why I believe that this is important is that we've mentioned it before, but security teams and application security, for example, tend to be generously between 3, 4, 5 orders of magnitude smaller than your product developers. It's always going to be a function of that, probably too small of an amount. It is lean as lean can be. And at the end of the day, I don't want to be overly reductive about it, but what we seek to accomplish through the Security Enablement Initiative is to do a lot more with less.
It sounds familiar, right?
Yes.
Full value of lean AppSec.
That's right. And so I crafted this truly exaggerated example to show you here. It's by design, right? Like, I want to illustrate that point in a way that hits home. 2 examples here. Alice is getting flooded with absolutely everything under the sun, with essentially impossible goals, and Bob has something that I would call reasonable ahead. Now, I could ask, and I'm not going to open a poll for this, but the chat here, who in here is most likely to do the right thing?
All right, it's going to be Alice or Bob. You can put an A or a B in the chat. I'm going to put a B.
Yeah. and really, the extreme example here is showing that simplifying and normalizing the workloads of individual by providing the right context and the right quantification of risk enables them to do better security work, even though they are not necessarily security engineers. There's a hidden thing, a hidden detail in this slide that I do want to take a second to harp on slightly, because I believe it's important. It's something that we as security practitioners don't talk about enough. And maybe for reasons that will make sense in a second. Unit economics. Unit economics is the business speak for what is the cost to the business for one vulnerability? What does it mean if it gets caught in code at the beginning versus what does it mean if it gets caught in production? And I don't want to go too long about that because it's a big tangent that's not really related to anything else. But sooner or later, if you're running an application security program or a security program, you will have to justify your cost to the business. You will have to justify, I need more people and here's why. If you show up prepared with metrics such as unit economics, and you speak the same language as, say, your CFO or your CXO, whatever they may be, you stand on much better ground and will be taken more seriously.
Yeah, the unit economics really ties in well with what Sri was talking about earlier with the value creation, right?
100%.
All right, so how does that apply to this blocking with confidence program? What you talked earlier in our tee up that blocking is simple, with confidence is deeply complex. So you want me to go forward in the slides here, or you want to pause here?
I'll just recap very, very briefly here. Like I said, the with confidence is profoundly difficult. The approach that we landed on at Relativity in terms of building that confidence is leveraging those multiple sources of information in one decisional pipeline. So stuff like CDSS, EPSS, reachability, environmental factor, temporal factor, all baked into one confidence rating with the appropriate weights, where you will, alter those weights over time based on the needs and how the business evolves, is what essentially builds the confidence to move and take action when necessary.
Can you share a little bit about the tools that you need to be able to do that?
I don't know if I would say a tool so much as being able to collate multiple sources of information together. I don't necessarily think that it's tooling specific, but the more tools you have, the more data points you have to drive your decisions.
And hopefully those data points agree with each other, right?
Hopefully they do. And when they don't, it's actually good too. It's important to know that there might be something there worth digging into.
Yeah. So in your program, kind of to take this up a level, and we shared a link earlier that we'll reshare again. It's kind of like a longer blog version talking about this program. The objective here is to get findings in front of developers as early as possible, at the PR stage, and fully automate out the need for somebody in application security to take a look at it, triage it, and hand it over, that it just automatically goes there, right?
That's perfectly correct.
So I think the first question that people will have is, how have you built this program in a way that you can trust the developers to make the right decision with the findings that you've put in front of them?
A lot of it has to do with providing the answers ahead of time. When you go and craft what is essentially a vulnerability ticket at the end of the day, once you have optimized for, what is the problem, what is the expected resolution look like, what is the code snippet that needs to be changed, or what are they if there's multiple ones, you leave a lot less to chance than saying, go fix Log4j.
Right. So you have in your flow here talking about exception handling.
Yes.
Let's get into that.
Yeah, so we spoke about blocking with confidence. So there comes a time where you block things, and when you do that, like I said, it's somewhat easy, and I don't think it's worth going into. I think that what's really more important is how do you unblock? How do you proceed forward and move on from that event? And that's kind of the exception handling. The traditional answer there is, you have your security team somewhere that instigates or blocks some in let's say the deployment pipeline. You'll have someone that says, "Oh, I resolved it, close the ticket." The ticket gets sent back to your application security team. Someone verifies and unblocks it. This is a manual process, right? And this is how you start. What I would rather have is move the keys to the kingdom to the right, either product engineering or a combination thereof leaders in a product vertical, and let them be the judges and arbiters of how they wish to unblock a specific event. And take on that decision, whether it means accepting the risk or going back to the business and saying, look, I understand that there is a security concern here, but also, there's 4 client migrations. I need 2 more hours to finish them. Can we do something about that? This information is not something that your AppSec team is going to have in most cases. If they do, that's fantastic. But in most business contexts I've been a part of, we don't get that level of visibility into the nitty-gritty of what individual customers are doing with the product.
Yeah, and going back to, again, Shree's comment about friction, if you're the person who's deciding whether or not to grant the exception, you're going to be adding a lot of friction because you're simply going to have to go back to the business and say, is there a reason that we need to be granting this, right?
Exactly. And that leads us to the next part there is, we're relinquishing the keys to the kingdom. We're giving them to someone else. That doesn't mean they shouldn't be held accountable. There's give and there's take. This is more of the take part. We need the accountability baked in. Over the course of when we implemented the Blocking with Confidence initiative, we came up with 3 major buckets of accountability, and there could be more, but for the sake of this, I'll keep it to those 3. One is having some high visibility dashboard that gets reviewed with very high frequency on, say, a weekly basis that showcases what actions have been taken by whom and for what reason, so they can be reviewed and assessed over time and really retrospected into as well. Having a dashboard where we essentially will rank individual teams and individual product verticals on an Olympic gold medal type thing with bronze, silver, gold, to see how our team's doing with managing their own risk. And there's a lot that goes into that, into making sure that people have the right information, that they can make their own decision, right? Like, you need to be transparent and provide the context for them to succeed. And last and not least, on the last slide, I added that key and I said something about handing over the keys to the kingdom. Well, when you do that, you always keep a spare.
You have a skeleton,
and
right?
Yes, you do need to maintain the ability to intervene just in case. You never know what might occur. It's good practice to make sure that if something goes wrong, you can and do step in and intervene.
Yeah. We've got some questions that we'll get to shortly in the Q&A, but kind of what do you want to leave people with?
Yeah. If you want to make, to bring this to a close, what we've discussed is to leverage the incentives ahead of us, the ones that we can control, either large bags of money or making work a little bit more bearable, to promote the ideal behaviors that you seek to accomplish. At the end of the day, there's behavioral psychology behind this that I am not equipped to explain, but that makes a lot of sense. We want to shine a light on the behaviors taken and the ones not taken through visibility initiatives. And last but definitely not least, yes, we trust and we empower people, but we also do verify and keep an eye on things.
So if you can, a couple years into this program, how would you describe your risk posture now in terms of the speed at which you're able to reduce risk and the friction or lack thereof that's introduced?
I think that one of the core outcomes of this has been the ability to uh, stratify the risk layers a lot better. What is a high security event or a high security vulnerability is a lot rarer occurrence. And when it is, it gets addressed a lot faster by virtue of having a lower volume, right? And what historically may have been at a medium based purely on CDSS may now be lowered to something low because of the environmental score, because of reachability, because of all those things put together. And so I think that what we did was a lot of de-risking some of what historically would have been higher criticality events, which at the end of the day means that there's probably still the same volume of vulnerabilities that do need to be addressed, but that volume shifts down from high to medium, from medium to low, and sometimes from low to informational. And that means having a lot longer SLAs, a lot more time, a lot more ability for engineers to resolve them. And perhaps more importantly, it allows for more junior staff members, for more junior engineers to tackle those complex issues with the right amount of time so that they can upskill themselves as well.
Yeah, I think that's one of the most exciting parts about your outcomes is that it's, no longer is the cadence so fast that you have to be on a production clock to just get to the next thing, that it's long enough, there's enough grace there that everyone can be responsible for it.
That's right.
I think this kind of tucks nicely into one of the questions from earlier in the Q&A. Let's see here. Scroll back. Mark asked, how do we get engineering and business solution architects to practically look at risk and threats early in the life cycle design? While threat modeling can help, it's often large, time demanding with very large reports, et cetera. Like, what would your advice be there?
There's probably a lot of ways to skin that particular cat, but I think that the approach that we've taken at Relativity is something that I like a lot. We have something that we will call the secure by design process, where at the inception of a new product line, feature sets, there is a business requirement to actually outline what the security impact of that will be. Which takes the form of questions and answers, gets forwarded to the security team for approval, for review, for back and forth at the very beginning of the inception phase of that project. And not only does that bring visibility across the business, it makes sure that we involve the right people early on, so that we can catch a lot more issues in the design phase where it's a lot less costly to do so.
Yeah. All right. So Zach has a question going back to your visibility dashboard. Is that dashboard just of blocking exceptions? So essentially, what are you bubbling up on that dashboard that you're providing everyone some visibility to?
It's a lot more than that. The blocking exceptions is definitely one portion of it. But at the end of the day, if we are asking the business to review a dashboard on a weekly basis, it's got to be more than one thing. Yeah. So you got to plug a lot more into there to have general value. What maybe I can say is that all of the other metrics displayed there are also in the form of bronze, silver, gold, and add up to a total rating across all categories, where that one also gets reviewed.
Yeah. I'm going to have you answer a question that's a bit different. You're at a very large company. Mikkel is at a Series A. So, in terms of, the pressures that are present, I work at a Series A. Things ship fast, things move quickly, you have a small team. How would you suggest starting to build up AppSec as they start to scale? What would be your approach here?
I came through Relativity through the acquisition of the Series A I was a part of. So this is really near and dear to me. Uh, I will say do your best. That's really the only thing that matters. We no matter what at a Series A, external companies looking at you know that you don't have a mature security program. It is a known fact, and do what makes sense for the business. A lot of time at a Series A, and this is only my experience speaking. It could be different for yours. Um, Focusing on compliance in order to enable sales to bigger orgs has been a bigger impact in terms of security-ish work than running a tight application security program. If you can do both, you can do both, but you got to pick your battles.
Yeah, I just dropped a link in the regular chat because we do have several Series A companies that we work with. One is Grip Security. And I think looking at the way a security company chooses to build their own security programs is a really smart way to do it.
Yes.
They absolutely look at compliance. They consider security to be a core way of building trust. And so, the CTO wrote a blog for us talking about how their program works and essentially broke it down into things like, understand the frameworks that you have to operate under, whether it's PCI, whether, even if you're Series A and going for FedRAMP, like what are those frameworks and making sure you're aligning to that. You have a really great advantage when you're at a Series A or B or C, where your teams are small enough that you probably know everybody in engineering and you can have relationships with them. And so another example that I will share is actually from Alex. He's on here. Hey, Alex, from Starburst. They have a DevSecOps practice at Starburst, which is another smaller company. And he really credits relationship building with the engineering team to be a really big part of his success. And the model that we often see at these smaller companies, and I'll drop one more, Jellyfish would be the third that I would look at, is that the security team is kind of almost dotted line over to the engineering team. Was that your experience, Raphael, when you were at a startup?
I think that it was a mishmash of all of these combined. Depending, Series A can last for, let's say a year, but in that year, you go through 10 years of growth. So you go through multiple phases.
I hear you. I hear you. All right. We are very much on time here. I want to double check the Q&A and make sure we haven't missed anything critical here. I think we've answered everything. So I think it's time to start wrapping up. Nobody leave yet because I have a lightsaber giveaway announcement. But first, Raphael, thank you so much. I want to promote your open recs that you have at Relativity. So let me get the link up and maybe you can share a little bit about what the team is hiring for.
Yeah, we've got a few roles open, both under my org and under just the greater security umbrella. We're very easy to talk to. Come say hello, and who knows? It might work out.
Yeah, that's the point of community, right? Hear about these opportunities from people in the future. Okay, so I do want to I'll give you a wave goodbye, Raphael, and we'll see you later.